Hello, welcome again to another edition of the Michigan Conservative Roundtable. We're like the five, but there's only three of us, and without Dana Perot. And tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about partisan politics. We're going to start off with talking about Justin Amash of the 3rd Congressional District in Michigan, and I hope I said his name right. And Justin, I apologize if I didn't, because I really do want to get people's names right. What Congressman Amash has done is he's announced that he's left the Republican Party as a protest against the partisan politics that are supposedly tearing our nation apart. He's the only Republican so far that has said that he thinks there are impeachable articles against President Trump. Leads me to believe that might be the real reason for him leaving the GOP, but to try to be charitable here, I will give the congressman points for trying to stand on principle. You know, he's trying to carve out a niche here that, and partisan politics certainly can be bad. So I'll give him some points for principle, but I think what he's doing is he's making what I call the purity mistake. You know, you're trying to be absolutely crystal pure, you know, in your beliefs to the point that, okay, all that other stuff, we're going to get away from that, we're going to get away from that. We're looking for some sort of purity, and the problem is that purity just doesn't exist. You know, if you're going to be a conservative, you're going to gravitate toward the Republican Party. If you're going to be progressive, you're going to gravitate toward the Democratic Party. If you're going to be libertarian, you're the biggest ones making the purity mistake. But that's my take on it. Points for principle are my initial take, but I think he's just trying for a purity that just isn't possible. Gentlemen.
If I may.
Yes, you may.
Good riddance. Okay? Good riddance. And I do mean that. The political pragmatist in me, I am concerned that now our magic number's up to 19, but it's just one, so I am content with his departure.
And I think the seat's going to stay Republican anyway, myself.
It's likely to. It covers Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the west side of our state is mostly been conservative for a very long time. I also say good riddance. You know, you say he stands on principle. I say he stands on wanting a lot of attention for himself. And what are these articles of impeachment he's talking about? Collusion with Russia? Obstructing a crime that didn't happen? I mean, I think he's got little to no concern about the crimes committed by Robert Mueller, James Comey, Clapper, Brennan, the vice president, the president, meaning Obama and Biden. I think he's buying into a false narrative akin to hands up, don't shoot. Even after all of these people on the left found out through forensic science, because they love science so much, through forensic science that Michael Brown did not have his hands up. Mm-hmm. Because when you have your hands up and you get shot in your arm, it's going to be in the back of your arm. When your hands are down, it's going to be in the front of your arm, which was the case with Mr. Brown.
So I suspect something here, and I have nothing to support or prove my suspicions here. I almost suspect he was trying to straddle the issue and probably didn't like the pushback he got, and, well, I'm fooey with you guys.
Yeah.
And I can't point to any one thing, but I'm getting the feeling something along those lines.
Well, I think he was a never-Trumper all along. And that's what we call Republicans who want to go against the grain and be against Donald Trump because he's Donald Trump. And, you know, he's a wild guy and might say anything. So that's where he comes from. Like I said, he's working off a false narrative. So that's where I think it negates the principle thing. You're giving him a lot more credit than I do.
Yeah, I'm willing. I mean, there are very few people, to give him his due in Congress, he does refer to the Constitution a little more truly than our liberal and progressive brethren.
Well, that's not hard to do.
You know, and that isn't very hard to do. And I do think one of the things that are not to sound too much in his camp, but I think one of the things that are lacking is a little bit of charity in our society generally. So I'm trying to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there. And
I'm giving him no benefit.
Yeah, I give him no benefit either. I give him a swift kick in the ass.
I'm caught in the middle on this one, aren't I?
Yes, you are.
Well, you're being kind, and I have obviously, I'm not against kindness, but it has to be warranted.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like the man who won't pick up the trash to get his sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be warranted. You got to work for it.
Yeah. There's a theme here, folks. I hope you're catching on to it. Now, getting back to Amash real quick, though, one of the things that struck me is his call. He's becoming independent. And we hear that call from time to time about becoming independent with, and thinking for ourselves. And to be critical myself of him at this point, I don't think there's no such thing as an independent in politics. I don't think there is. I mean, we've got Bernie Sanders and Angus King from Vermont and Maine, respectively, that are in the U.S. Senate that call themselves independents, but they caucus with the Democrats. Yeah. They're Democrats. So, with all due respect...
He calls himself an independent and espouses communism. Mm-hmm. That would concern me there.
He's always been a
Bernie.
Bernie, okay.
Yeah, watch Bernie's held accountable.
Yeah.
And
I'll
spell that out for you pretty clearly.
You'll see. You will see it absolutely. And not even to single out Congressman Amash. I don't think anybody's really independent in politics. I think the whole cry for trying to be independent and trying to seek the common ground for everybody else is a false premise, because nobody's independent in politics. You don't run for office if you're independent. You run for office to try to get certain things done. Whether you're a constitutional conservative, which we could use more of, or whether you are a progressive socialist liberal, such as Bernie Sanders, you don't get into government because you're independent. You get into government because you want certain things done.
He wants to change our form of government from a constitutional republic to a totalitarian communism, much like the Soviet Union had, which he has Bernie Sanders had great admiration for the Soviets.
If I may comment on something Marty brought up here, the whole independent running for office thing. You can look at Ross Perot, and that might have been one of the more successful attempts, and all he did was really ruin the Republicans. But I've read some books about President Trump in his earlier years, and he kind of indicated that, I think he kind of teased that maybe he'd run as an independent, but at some point he realized that if he were to run as an independent, he would never win. So, according to what I've read, that prompted him to choose, because he had more in common with the Republicans than the Democrats. And so what President Trump opted was he was going to be a Republican, but operate as an independent within the Republican Party. And of course, that doesn't sit well with never-Trumpers.
Right. Well, they're establishment people, so.
Yeah. Bit of a trivial thing, since TJ brought it up, sort of, is, Ross Perot is a fairly independent, fairly successful independent candidate. But, all that independent thing did was cost George W. Bush a second term.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton won with less of the popular vote than Michael Dukakis lost with in 1988. And what was the difference? The independent votes that got siphoned off by Ross Perot.
Well, you can certainly make
independency can hurt you.
You can certainly make the case that Al Gore didn't get to be president because of
Nader, because
Ralph Nader, the Green Party guy.
Green Party, yep.
He cost him enough votes in Florida to flip Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, there are countries in this world that have what's called proportional representation, for example, that's trying to get to everybody's represented, and there's a certain amount of independence. And what do you get? You get nations like Belgium that took 536 days to form a government because there weren't clear-cut choices that the two-party system offers. Everybody's represented proportionally, so now nobody can get together, to form a government. That, I think, is another form of that purity mistake that I was talking about at the beginning.
I'll tell you, the other side of that coin is you look at California, where they don't choose their governor, and I don't know how they elect their senators, but they don't choose their governor based on Republican versus Democrat or Republican versus Independent or what have you. They take the top two people, the top two vote getters, and in this case, they're always Democrats. So Republicans very often don't even bother to run. So they have a one-party government, and you can look at that state and say it's a disaster. That's what the Democrats want for America. They want a one-party government, and this whole country will look like California inside of 15 years.
Yeah.
And you aren't going to like it.
Well, the whole point of politics and the whole point of political parties, quite frankly, and I know several of the founders did decry the advent of political parties, not the least of them was George Washington. But the whole point of political parties is to try to get people to coalesce around certain basic ideas in order to affect good government.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see how you get away with that outside of doing California's one party, or Belgium. Italy's another example. Bolivia and South America, they have trouble forming governments because nobody's really coalesced around basic ideas that people, well, I'm for this, I'm for that. And it hurts us in the long. Being independent in that manner, I think, hurts the nation more than it helps it.
Well, I've always said, I had someone in my family say, well, I'm an independent. I said, well, what you're standing for is nothing. You
Yeah.
stand for nothing.
Yeah.
And we talked in another video, in fact, it was our most watched video, called Another Civil War. What might kick off a civil war, which Terry and I thought might be coming, you thought might not.
I'm really stuck in the middle on this.
Well,
Bring it on.
Just to show you, we don't all agree every time on every topic. Sometimes Marty and TJ are wrong. So in the one of the things that can kick off that civil war that we talked about is no common ground. When there's just nowhere to go,
Yeah.
I'm here, you're there, it's on. Especially if one side wants it.
Yeah.
If I decide I want to fight you, one or two things are going to happen. We're going to have a fight, whether you want one or not.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a fight, or you're going to get a beat down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are those things that are going to happen.
Well, that's the whole problem with the coexist bumper stickers that we see all over the place. Why can't we all just get along? Well, you know what? That's not the worst principle in the world until the first person decides not to get along, which is exactly what Mac is saying.
Well, one of those symbols there doesn't believe in the existence of one of the other symbols.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a fool's fodder,
Yeah.
I'd say.
It's a fool's errand. One thing I'm going to say, too, and I hope I'm not forcing things in here, is that we hear this from the left more than the right, but Amash is trying to become independent, I think, is a bit of a segue here. We've got a certain group of people out there, we shouldn't label. Is it Bloomfeld, the former mayor of New York? Bloomberg, I'm sorry, that actually started a group that, we're trying to get beyond labels. And it's like, why do you hate labels? TJ, I'm going to ask you a question point blank. Does it bother you to be called a conservative?
No,
I just labeled you, though, didn't I?
I'll live with that.
See? Now, what's the
Or
problem?
a hero. Who doesn't want to be labeled that?
Who doesn't want to be a hero?
Or a great guy or whatever.
Yeah. So, Congressman Amash, what's wrong with the label GOP that you don't like it? Or, more generally to my progressive friends, why are you against labels other than us right-wingers labeling us, and we seem to be fine with it?
Well, I would tell you, Congressman Amash, he's not for jobs. He's not for America first. He's not for a sovereign nation. This guy's no Republican, even in your other than unless you want to be the Mitt Romney or Susan Collins or Lisa Murkowski kind of Republican. I wish they were independents too. Just get away from me.
So yeah, in the whole idea of being independents, I think being an independent, politically is kind of a myth. I think.
Right.
Hey, anything else, fellas?
I don't think so.
Negative.
All right. Well, we've just sat here and successfully labeled ourselves, I'm sure, and a lot of people out there are going to throw unimaginable labels upon us. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, please subscribe, please feel free to comment. And as we always say at the Michigan Conservative Roundtable, be safe, watch your six, and don't tread on me.